My name is Steve Lear, and I have 7 children of average intelligence. They went to Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Kansas. And some of them didn't even go. And none of them went to grad school. So I have extra money in my 529. All right. I get to be the moderator for this question and answer type time. And you're going to have a chance to ask some questions, but I really, from Cozy's conversation, I added some additional questions to what we had already come up with. But I would like to introduce our panel. Danielle? Jostro.
Yep.
Jostro?
Yep.
Okay. She is from Southwest High School, city girl.
Talk about that later.
I think it's pretty interesting these days, isn't it?
It's a good place to be.
Yep. And Achieve Minneapolis. She's a school counselor. So she's coming at this not so much as somebody who does this professionally, but she does it within the school system. Some major things. She was honored as the first ever recipient of the Minnesota Association for College Admissions Counseling Student Service Award. That was just last year. Support of the students. She does serve at the University of Iowa on the State High School Advisory Board. She's got lots of good education, and as you can tell, very accomplished.
Thank you.
Gary Saltzman Bahar, KSP College Consulting. She founded this over 10 years ago. What's with all this Iowa stuff here tonight?
Grad school, Iowa. I went to grad school, Iowa, after going to a small liberal arts school because I grew up in Nebraska and missed football games for 4 years. So, you know, now of course there's nothing to miss in Nebraska, so it's all the way. But, yeah. I went to grad school.
Her first taste of admissions work was as a senior interviewer and tour guide at her alma mater, Bowdoin. And since then, she's worked for, what's the ACT organization? What's that?
The ACT, the test, ACT. Which is in Iowa City, yeah, ACT.
Serving as the Chicago chair for the Bowdoin College Alumni Schools Interviewing Committee, and is an adjunct faculty member at U of M and George Washington. Okay. She does have a firm that does this, and I do want to make this clear, but I'm going to do this after I introduce Margaret McKibben of Achieve Academics. She's got lots of education as well, political science, East Coaster. She has worked for colleges and universities for over 20 years in a wide variety of roles. She really enjoys working with the students to help them become more self-aware and prepared to succeed. Borrow a phrase from her son. She geeks out over college brochures, websites, and geeks out. Okay. The other individual is Seth Meisler. Seth Meisler's on this panel. Andy's my partner at Affiance Financial. He joined us in 2007. He's got the most initials behind his name than anybody else in the firm. And he now has 3 children. One of them is she in her gap year?
Yep.
She's in her gap year. So he's now going through all of this, and he'll be helping us from a tax standpoint, savings, and how to pay for it. So, I have an important question that I'd like to ask. how much influence do parents really have on their children's decision of where they go to school? So I am going to have Danielle, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I think it depends on the day.
Can everybody hear? Or you want her to use a mic?
Mic, better. I'm really not a
Use
mic.
mic. We have older people in the back.
Okay. There's space up in front, just like here. So the question is, what's the impact of parents on students' final choice? I think the research says that the biggest impact is the weather on the day of the college tour and the tour guide. So there you go. That'll answer your question. Yeah.
Tiny
Yeah,
hall.
it's too
Yeah,
scary.
tiny hall. So I think, depending, obviously, parents oftentimes hold the purse strings for the whole conversation, which can be a huge factor in it. But when you get down to the process and how they're going through their search and how they're going through the exploration process, it's much more pushed by peers and friends and who they know, and this person went there and so forth. So it's true, you guys don't know anything because you're parents until they get to be about 25. And then at the school, at some point, I become like a parent, so they don't listen to me anymore, and then we have to bring in the college people. So that's just part of the game. But there
Okay.
we go.
Jerry,
Anybody
you have anything you want to add to this?
Yes, I completely agree that parents, and I am a parent of 3 of my own kids. I think what we can help them do is instill values and as we know the personalities, make suggestions as what we think would be good fits, and knowing their flaws and weaknesses, and point that, make sure that we're making choices that are healthy for them. But I think the biggest mistake that I see is parents wanting to relive their college years through their kids. And we have to step back, myself included. You have to step back. And I think I was just sharing this with my table, is my experience is not going to be that of my children's. And I have 2 in high school right now. And so it's good to have discussions, but it's also good to stop and realize this is their exploration. And as much as we may want them to go to an alma mater or do something like that, we need to be sensitive and let them express what they want, guide them so they're making the right choices and the safe choices, certainly. But I don't view my role as picking my kids' school. I view my role as helping them facilitate to find somewhere that's going to make them happy and most of all healthy over the next 4 years.
So are you declaring that I went to my college reunion this past weekend and my wife brought home our 9-month-old, one of those little Bucky jackets, Wisconsin, that was totally inappropriate?
Well, it depends how you feel about Wisconsin. So I'll leave it at that.
Go ahead with yours.
Perfect. It would match the Bucky mobile that home.
Do you want to add anything? And let me add an additional part of this question. If the parent doesn't have much influence, what would you suggest? If the parent feels that the kid's possibly making a pretty big mistake, what would you suggest?
I would suggest they call in the troops. That's when you have the aunts and uncles and the neighbors and other people talk to your child. I love my son dearly, but like all of you, and even though I've been doing this for decades, he thought I was a dummy and did not want one bit of my help. So had to enlist other people to be part of that team or the village or whatever you want to call it. He could hear messages and information from them. I could plant little seeds in their mind. But if I said turn left, he was going to turn right. So be smart about asking for help. And that's probably what all of us are here for. To go back to the original thing about how much influence do we have, again, I think it's partly your child or your grandchild better. Work with your kid's style. And I also do tell every parent that I work with that, hey, look, we already had our turn. This is your kid's turn. So as much as you want them to be the next Bucky, some kids, if you say that, they're going to say, absolutely not. Others will sign me up, but really, they need to find their place.
Okay, I'm going to come to you. You need to think about like what you said to your daughter. Seth, what'd you say to your daughter?
So for
Talk to the mom.
So my daughter did something a little bit unusual, and that is that when all the kids were at school and they had to wear the sweatshirts of the school that they were going to, she went to the Gap and she bought a Gap sweatshirt because she decided to take a gap year. So she approached my wife and I, and it did not come from us at all. And she came and said, I don't want to go to school after graduation. I would like to take a year off and I'd like to have an experience. And I said to my daughter, I thought it was great personally, but I said to her, I have 3 conditions. So number 1, it needs to be an experience. It cannot be, you can't be a nanny. It needs to be something that it will be an experience that you will gain from it. Number 2, I said, you didn't get here on your own. Other people helped you along the way in a wide variety of services. And so there needs to be a component of giving back. So that is really important. And you need to figure out how you're going to give back. The third thing I said is, I'm not paying for a lifestyle. So that semester going sailing into the Caribbean, that looks great. You can pay for that because I'm not. So that's basically those were the 3 conditions that I gave her. I said, after that, everything is open. Little did I know that you had volunteered in Southeast Asia. And that's what she ended up doing. And she's currently in Bali, or in an island off of Bali doing turtle conservation. So she left a week after graduation, and she has volunteered through an organization out of New Zealand called International Volunteer Headquarters. And she's been in Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and in Bali now. I think it's week 2 of being in Bali. She's been doing construction for a school for disabled children. She has been building homes for homeless people, and a wide variety of different experiences.
Counselors, what do you say about a child taking a gap year? What's the pros and cons? I'm going to let you go first this time. What's the pros and cons about taking a gap year, or just deciding not to go, or go and drop out and then go back? What's the thoughts about a young person doing the interruptions?
Going to school, dropping
Can
out.
everybody hear?
Going to school, dropping out, and going back, not a good plan. You lose all that financial aid, you have to start back over. If you've gotten scholarships that were for 4 years, they're gone. This is also true if you transfer to another school, so think about that. I honestly don't see a whole lot of negatives for a gap year. Usually your child matures a lot in that year. They may find some more clarity about what their passion is, their interest. They certainly going to have a very interesting story when they're applying and talking to recruiters. They've got more life experience. They're more adult than they were previous year. Another interesting tactic that I just heard of was you can get more aid the more kids you have in school. So let's say your kids are pretty close. What if one takes a gap year and then you have 2 start the next year? You're going to get a lot more financial aid and more money. So it could actually be a smart financial move. I think it's an awesome idea, and more and more people are doing it.
I agree. I like the idea of conditions. I think oftentimes kids say, senior year is really stressful, I need a break, and they take a year off, and they envision that as sitting on your couch playing video games, and that's not going to further them towards their goal. As a plug, Southwest is actually hosting the Gap Year Fair this year. So timely question, thank you very much. January 23rd, in our, there'll be a presentation first, and then a bunch of organizations will come to our gym. And it's really a great opportunity to check out.
Can anybody attend?
Yeah, anybody can attend. It's community-wide org has previously been held at Groves.
Yeah, it is.
Groves. And I don't know if they're
great.
constructing or whatever this year, but I think it's really important to check out the different programs. There are gap year programs that students can earn college credit. There are gap year programs where they can do mission work, where they can further their education in other ways. Sometimes gap years can cost as much as a year of college. So depending on what you're doing, it is a cost. So it's important to be thoughtful about what you're doing and to kind of consider all the options. From a logistics standpoint, when our students, I've seen an increase of gap year exploration in my students. We have about 450 seniors every year. About 4% this past graduating class actually are exploring gap years. I think it's really important to go through logistically the process of applying to college. So even though you hopefully are coming out of it with, kind of a life-changing experience, being in high school, that's the one time you get access to your teachers for letters of recommendation. That's the one time you get the counselor letter of recommendation. So those are the pieces that need to be in place regardless of where that application goes. So whether or not you take a gap year or you actually follow through, because, best laid plans, right? Teenagers, they're always fairly sure what they're going to do. To put those pieces in place and keep your options open.
Yeah, can I just add one quick thing? Yeah, so in the case of my daughter, she did go through the college application process. She then deferred her acceptance. She's going to be going to Oberlin in the fall, and so she deferred her acceptance to the fall of 2019.
Yeah, exactly what Seth and Danielle said. You have to apply to college while you're a senior. I mean, I guess you don't have to, but if college is in your future, you absolutely should go through the process. A lot of the formal GAP programs, not all of them, but a lot of them also have applications, and those tend to be due also in November and December. Many of those also need recommendations and whatnot. So lots of times students who are contemplating a gap year are doing GAP applications as well as college applications at the same time. You can defer, Seth said, which is what sounds like his daughter did. The one thing to keep in mind is a school, generally speaking, will hold that space. They don't always hold the merit awards. And I don't call it merit aid and not just a technicality, but the merit awards that a school may give that are given by admissions. If you need to ask, I mean, if your child defers, it's 100% possible that scholarship is gone. And that's a choice you need to make. And that may be an argument for then having a child study abroad sophomore year, junior year, or even doing it over a summer. But that's one thing I have seen clients make a choice on. That potentially they got a merit award from admissions. It's too good to pass up. And Michelle's shaking her head, so maybe that was something you guys talked about. I don't know, but that's something to keep in mind.
Okay. Going to switch subjects a little bit. Now we're talking about college acceptance. So that's what's in the mind. What are the most important areas for a high schooler today to focus on? GPA, ACTs, extracurricular, service activities. So this person wants to go to college. What would it be wise for them to focus on? Karen.
Grades are, in my opinion, grades are 100% always the most important thing. It is unbelievably hard, in my experience, when there's a student that has a 2.5 GPA and walked in and out with a 32 ACT, and good for that student. It is unbelievably hard to make a case to any college because the admissions officers say, well, what happened? What did you do? And so grades are always the most important thing. Cozy mentioned test score optional schools. Great. The problem is test score optional schools are only great for the good students, right? You can't use the test score optional option if you have a 2.8 GPA. Grades are always, always, always the most important thing. And so it all matters, and you need to plan ahead and get the test scores in. And just because there are test score optional schools out there, by the way, that doesn't give you a pass for taking the tests. And Minnesota schools do employ, I think most of them are doing the ACT in Illinois. Because I'm based in Evanston, we now do the SAT, and I think one of the schools here switched to SAT over ACT. But anyway, most states, all the schools are doing some type of testing. You still need to take it, but absolutely, hands down, grades are the most important thing in my book.
I would echo that. Obviously, as a school counselor, it's kind of what I do, but it's important that you're in class and you're doing well. It's a balance of taking the best, it's kind of a setup, right? The most challenging coursework in which you can be successful. That's what they say. So it's putting in and demonstrating that you can do the college level work all the way through your senior year, not taking that senior year off. That's really critically important. Trends are important. Colleges understand that students are people, and people have life happen to them. So looking at if there's an event or something that happens that they are recovering from, those are all skills to know. I think the other thing that is a huge caution, so please hear this. My initial answer was going to be yes, all of those things are important. I think sometimes when we talk about the college application process and you hear about, well, I need to be a volunteer and I need to play the tuba and I need to, all these things, that your students oftentimes approach that as a checklist. And that is not at all what it's intended to be. So students should really use their extracurricular activities as an opportunity to explore their passions. They don't have to do one of everything. If they're really into sports, or they're really into soccer, or they're really into this mission or this purpose of the religious institution, that's okay. And sometimes students don't have the opportunity to do those things. Sometimes they have work. Sometimes they have family obligations. That's okay. So being thoughtful about what you're doing and doing it for a purpose and not just to check a box.
Yeah, this is good.
To reiterate, I used to tell people, you don't need this laundry list. You're not doing this for the checklist. You need to demonstrate your passion. And the other thing I think that schools are looking for are some leadership demonstrations. And maybe you're captain of the team. That's awesome. But think of some of these giant schools around here. You can only have one of those. Mm-hmm. Well, you could, for your team, you could organize some, let's go feed my starving children, or you could organize something to start a new club or be welcoming to new students. There are lots of little places that students can demonstrate leadership at their school, but certainly also in their community. They can do some volunteer work. But again, please don't make it feel like I've got to have a list of 25 things. No, you need to have some things that you're passionate about. And I think the schools want to see, is this going to be a leader? And think about it from the school side. They want your kid to come there, and they want your student to make their school a better place. So they want the kids who are going to come there and contribute to that community.
How does a student show passion? How do they demonstrate passion? And not by going on the website, but how do they demonstrate passion?
They're all in. They're going to competitions. They're participating year-round. They're showing commitment. It's not just, I did volunteer work this one time my sophomore year for 3 hours. I was vested in this organization, and the applications
they took a leadership role.
And the applications ask you, how much time did you spend, how many weeks per year, and how many hours per week? So you're communicating that on the application.
Carrie, I want a follow-up question on your comment, which is, how good do the grades need to be?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, you did an example of 2.5 or 2.6, and I was at 3.2.
Right. Well, so the first thing I want to say is there are over 3,000 colleges and universities out there, and there's one for everybody. So that's the first thing I really think that all of us are smiling at and agree at. There's one for everybody. There's not just one good school. And so lots of times, and I'm sure you hear this too, I want to go to a good school. And I say, well, what does that mean to you? There are 3,000 good schools out there. So it's really about the fit. And how good do grades have to be? As good as you can do, right? I mean, I think our students have a job in high school, and that is to be good students. And I think as parents, as educators, as professionals, all of us, our job is to encourage them to work to the very best of their abilities. But that does not mean putting them in all AP or IB courses if they can't handle it. We're not doing any good. And what I always say is a C is a C. Regardless of what the letters are in front of it, a C is a C. If they are getting a C, they are not handling that. That is not the right level for them, quite honestly. And so they need to work as hard as they can at the level, and we need to support and be proud of the level that they're at and encourage them. It is good, and I think Danielle probably has got the best insight to this, to definitely encourage the kids to take a risk in the areas they're good at. If they are very strong mathematicians, then maybe we push them into IB and encourage them and say, look, worst case, you get a B. That's great, right? An A or B means you're at the right level in my book. But if they, if Spanish or French or German or whatever is just the bane of their existence, then maybe we do Spanish 4, maybe we don't do AP. So you want to work hard, but we also, we need to listen to them and not turn them into robots.
Okay. Next question. This is for Seth Meisler. What important tax implications should we be considering when saving and paying for college? So go saving first and then go paying, and take it from a tax standpoint.
Yeah, so thank you. So the best deal right now certainly is the 529 savings. With a change in the state tax code, the Minnesota state tax code, you can now deduct up to $3,000 of 529 contributions. That's $3,000 for the family. So in other words, if you have 3 children, $1,000 each, not $3,000, right? So total's $3,000.
What are you deducting it from?
From your state tax return, from your Minnesota state tax return. Now,
Is it the tax or the income?
it is a $3,000 deduction on your tax return, which basically is about $300 tax savings, more or less. The one really interesting thing is it can be in any 529. It does not need to be contributed to a Minnesota state 529. So that's a great thing.
Are there income limits on that?
There are no income limits. So yes, so just Minnesota also offers a tax credit, which they've offered for a number of years. A lot of people do not qualify for the Minnesota state tax credit because their income is too high. So from a savings point, that is certainly the best option available. And there's no income limits to contribute to a 529, to any 529. There are gifting rules, but not an income. In terms of spending, again, using the 529s is also a great option. Why? Because assuming that the college is an accredited university, and the withdrawals from the 529 are tax-free. So any growth on the 529 is tax-free if it's used for an accredited university as well as items related to school. And that could be, again, tuition, room and board up to a certain extent, books, and even a computer as well. And comment from Andy.
So when is the best time for the grandparents
Thank you.
529 plan
Did you
withdrawal?
want to get up here? No, I'm kidding.
We never want to step on yours.
So 529.
Hang on, just to elaborate on Andy's question. Can you share, because we have a number of grandparents here, can you share with the group the grandparent strategy?
Yeah, so 529 savings does not need to be done by the parents alone. It can be, other family members can certainly contribute to 529s or have their own 529s or own savings for college. However, the thing is that the timing of family contributions to a student's college does make a difference. Why? Because when it comes to financial aid in particular, colleges will look at where is that money coming from. And they're going to ask, well, wait a second, if you got money in year 1 from X source, let's say it's from grandparents, that must mean that those grandparents are going to be giving in year 2, year 3, and year 4. Therefore, you don't need that amount of financial aid because you're getting it from somewhere else. So
It also says it's treated as the 20% county rate, not the 5.6%.
well, it's not exactly, because the 20% is the assets on the FAFSA. This is the income, this is the cash flow being used to pay the tuition. So it's a little bit different. The cash flow is actually a 1-for-1, right? So the cash flow is 1-for-1. That's not 20%. So what do we recommend for grandparents? We recommend save your dollars and give for the last year. Why the last year? Because year 4, you're not filling out a financial aid application saying, where's this money coming from? So timing of when grandparents are contributing to a child's education really does make a difference.
Thank you. I have two more questions and then I'm going to open it up. Skin in the game. What is your suggestion to parents or grandparents about their student having monetary skin in the game?
Okay. Who you choose?
No, you.
No, you, come on. I know it's all dependent.
Yeah.
I know that, every situation is different, so there isn't an answer. But I think it's very important that the group gets some sort of opinion from the three of you of what might be the suggestion.
I'll tell you what we did in our family is that we told our son he did need to have some skin in the game. And so we are having him take out the loans. Everybody in this room, no matter what your income level is, you can get some federal student loan money. We had him take them out. It's in his name. Every year, he has to sign the paperwork, go in for the counseling. We sit down, we talk about it. He knows when he comes out, he's going to have X number of dollars in debt. So when he's asking me for money, or I want to go to spring break, or I want to do this, I really don't want to have a summer job. I just want to sit around and play video games. We remind him, no, you're going to have to pay this. So I don't know what we're going to do at the end. I've heard of some families that for graduation, they pay off the loans for the parent, for the student. I've had some people I know who just, their kids graduate with this debt and they will take care of it. That part I think is up to everybody. But for us, personally, I felt he needed skin in the game. It makes it real to him.
Danielle?
I agree. I'm actually going to hedge on this question and also say I would push it beyond just the monetary. Oftentimes, my first contact would be from a parent rather than a student. So parents that are questioning, what about this? What about this? If you're investing more energy in your student's college search than they are, that's probably something to think about. So I think as you go through the whole process, it's an ongoing conversation. Part of it's developmentally appropriate for them to understand where they are and what they own. It's frightening how few kids understand what the value of money actually is. So I sit down and have many conversations with students who are like, oh, look, they gave me $37,000. I'm like, yeah, that's a lot. What does that mean? Like, but they gave me $37,000, and it's really talking students through the process and understanding. That's like a really nice new car, or that's this. If they don't have that appreciation, I guess, of what their cost is, what the actual output is for you, it's really, I think, can be detrimental to their performance. I don't mean like, they're going to not do well, but I think the skin in the game is definitely key. Go ahead.
I think when you start talking about colleges with students or with your own family members, what tuition is has to come up. I don't think it should be hidden from them. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that you should blindly talk about it, but you should say, Wisconsin has reciprocity if you're able to get in, Minnesota's this, Northwestern's this. I think those are numbers they do need to understand. I think that they need to understand that so they go and do well and don't fail out freshman year and don't go down the wrong path. And I think those are all learning points. I paid off, I think, my last student loan when I was 28 or 29 and proud that I did that. And certainly if my children choose to go to a school that is beyond what we have saved in our 529s or whatnot and the merit and choose to go somewhere where there isn't the merit, then that's a conversation we've already kind of started having with them. I also am a big believer in spending money should come from the kids. So it's not just a tuition. It's you want to go to Boston and be able to go out, get a job, and figure that in with your 4 years there.
Okay. Seth, I want you to answer this with a little different lens. Okay. As a financial advisor, you sit in on lots of meetings where the parents turn to us and say, this is so important. I want to make sure that 100% of this is taken care of.
Yeah, I think So I certainly have an opinion, a personal opinion on this, but as a financial advisor, right, we try to make sure that what individuals want, how realistic is it reaching that goal, or what needs to happen in terms of reaching that goal. And certainly the college conversation needs to happen many years in advance in order to build up to that savings. Right, to get to $100,000 in savings, which would be close to 4 years at University of Minnesota, if it's 5% rate of return, you're looking at saving about $300 a month from the day that the kid is born, your child is born. And so those are the conversations that we have, that we think about how much do you need to save to get there. Certainly, and I think that having a frank, this is my personal opinion, but I think having a frank conversation with your children about the finances, about the money, about what things look like, as difficult as it is, I think is important to have.
Okay, now, adding to that, will you describe to the people Moneynomics and an advertisement for Affiance Financial, okay? And how we help in what you just talked about.
Right, so one of the services that we do provide for our clients is called Moneynomics, where an 18-year-old or a high school or college student comes in and actually has basically an introduction to financing, to money. I joke, my daughter used to think I was involved in the sock market, not stock market. So it's only, I don't know how recently she figured out that it was not socks. But I think the question I would have for the college counselors is, do you have that conversation with regards to money and realistic, and do parents come in and say, well, here's what we can afford, here's what we can't afford, versus children who may say, well, wait, I want to go here that's going to cost $75,000 a year. What's that experience like for the two of you?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the first things that I certainly try and gauge from the families is, are there financial barriers, or the financial, are you trying to stay within a certain financial range, I guess? And if that is the case, I say we can make that happen. And sometimes making that happen means we do need to look at certain schools, or we need to make sure we're looking at those high merit award schools, or we do need to potentially alter the list or be willing to go out of state, and all those things come into play. But that is something that I bring in from day one. It's definitely not, and I do find that it has to happen in front of the kids and the parents. It's a joint discussion. So it can't be done behind the kids' backs. It's got to be a joint discussion so the kids do understand where the parents are coming from, and vice versa.
Okay. Cool. Go ahead.
As I say, I find it a hard conversation to have, though. Sometimes the parents seem, I don't know, embarrassed, or they don't want to have money conversations with their child right there. So sometimes I feel like that's almost the first time that parents and student have ever spoken about money before. So sometimes I get parents that look like deer in the headlights of, they can go wherever they want. We're going to take care of this. And other times I go get parents who come in and say, we are absolutely not paying more than this, period. I don't care where they go. I at least feel like we're starting the conversation, but good Lord, I wish they'd had it before they sat down.
Okay, this is why we have jobs, just so you know. Financial. And there is a particular concern that we do have at Affiance Financial. And that is, we don't want 70-year-olds having to support their 50-year-old kids. There's a lot of lost dignity in that whole process. It's nice when an older person can give their kids and their grandkids money because they want to, and they know it will be spent well. But it's not a cool situation if they have to. So one of our philosophies is, please invest in these kids when they're young, get them educated, get them responsible, so that what happens is by the age of 25, they're not coming back looking for money. Now that's early for some people. But it's the concern that we have at Affiance, because we have too many people who are older who are supporting adult children. Okay, I have one last question, and then we're going to open it up. Prioritize, please. I got kind of lost in the conversation in that I could not figure out, well, what's the first decision that needs to be made in this post-high school search? What's the first decision that needs to be made?
Wow.
I know.
I like to start, this is an ideal scenario, but I would love to start with most students freshman, sophomore year. Because I feel like the first thing you need to do is really have your kids start learning, what do they like? What are they passionate about? What are they interested in? And you know they're going to change their minds, okay? Reassure them that's okay. But at least start talking about what do you think you want to do? Let's try to come up with some opportunities for you to explore that. Let's look for some maybe job shadowing or people you could talk to or an internship or a volunteer, something in that. And then maybe maybe you change course later. But for me, step one is getting to know or helping your kid, your student, get to know what excites me.
Okay. Danielle? You can pass it.
I
You
wanted
can
to be
pass
the
it.
third one. That's fine. I'll do
Okay.
So I would say the very first thing is actually to get to know the resources at your high school, including your high school counselor. I think it's really important as a freshman or sophomore, before you call me, before you call, is, what's available at my high school and what do I need to get in 4 years, right? A lot of high schools, you don't actually need foreign language to graduate. That doesn't mean you don't need it for college. And so don't press ahead without doing your research and talking. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean me. That means, talk to your high school. All high schools today have, I shouldn't say all, I can't make that assumption. The vast majority have, what's required to graduate from their high school, but also college curriculum, I guess, planning guides. So that's really the first step. Make sure you're going to have what you need to go to a college, and then start having conversations with maybe my sophomore year. Am I looking at a school where I'm going to need 3 years of foreign language? Am I looking at a school where I need that? Kind of start to gradually do it. I think the one piece of advice I would give is they're still kids, right? We all of high school should not be about college. And as much as we're all up here saying this, I have to tell you, their mental health is number one, and keeping them and enjoying them while they're so important. So the entire 4 years should not be spent about college. So you got to kind of pick and choose when to do it. And I think counselors and are great introductions. I think the high schools have programs that are great introductions. And then as you move towards the end of sophomore years when you really can kind of maybe start to focus a kid who's not focused. But it's almost worse when you have an overly eager freshman who's like, it's like, yeah, that's great. And high school is going to pass with blink of an eye. And what are you going to do for your high school career? So I think that's important to remember.
I'm going to focus on prom.
Prom.
You're what?
I've already taken. Promposal. I agree. I think even further back is kind of, and maybe this is reflective of the diverse population that I work with, but agreeing that college is an option, I think, is a really important piece. In my building, we talk a lot about defining college as basically all post-secondary education or training. With the shifting job market, with the shifting needs, everybody had to go to college, and now you don't need to go to college, and really kind of being aware of what your student, if they have an idea of what they're interested in, what that training or education really looks like. I think absolutely being involved from 9th grade on with your school. Oftentimes I think in elementary and middle school, it's a lot easier, right? The form comes home to volunteer in the classroom. This is what you can do. You can come in and, check papers or do spelling tests or do whatever the case may be. And it's pretty concrete as to how you can be involved in your students' education. And as you get to high school, sometimes you step back and you're like, oh, well, I guess they got it. And they don't. So being involved, communicating with your teachers, your students' teachers, helping them to figure out how to communicate with adults and self-advocate is really, really important, because that's going to be a process that's going to serve them well no matter what they do. I know that we have an extensive curriculum where we talk families through this. and that's specific to my school. You know, not everybody's school has it or does it the same way, but checking out what's available. I believe in opportunities and options, so keeping doors open. So being aware that you don't need world language to graduate, but you do need at least 2 years of one to be considered a minimum candidate. If you want to be a minimum candidate, and having those conversations kind of from the beginning, so you can start to make some of those, you can start to have some of the conversations about trade-offs. You know, what if I do this, what am I giving up? And I think the mental health piece is huge. I've sit in and listened to my juniors and seniors talk to college reps, and I've had a couple students who have been very direct with them, talking about what are your resources on college campuses for mental health? What does this look like? And when I talk to reps, their concern, the college's concern, is often about the mental health of students. Kids are going to them so burned out, so stressed, so overwhelmed because of this idea that it has to be perfect, I have to do everything, and that's the only way to do it. So I think it's really important to take a breath and let them be kids and let them know that they learn from failure and they learn from mistakes, and those things are all builders of character.
Really quick question with a short answer, please.
Yes.
Are there tools in the high schools that help these kids understand their natural talents for occupational purposes and interests?
Yes, there are.
Can you name one or two of those tools?
Sure. So it depends on your school. We use a resource called Affiance that has built-in assessments. There's a version of the Myers-Briggs in there. There's a career interest profiler that shoots out John Holland's reset codes. So the 6 categories of college, or not college, work environments, kind of matching up with a personality test. Even on the ACT, if your kid sits down, if they don't realize that they can click through that section when they register online, they can take, there's a 78 question interest inventory that'll kind of give them some options and some direction. So there are definitely opportunities. So check in, see what they have.
Great. Questions?
What was the first one that did you call that first inventory?
Affiance. So Affiance is a tool that's purchased by the school
What
district.
school does
Say it again?
what school does your school go to,
Yeah.
your student go to?
Maple Grove.
They have it.
Yeah, I have it.
I don't,
I think they do.
Can you spell it?
Career Resource Center.
Yep. So in Minnesota we say Naviance, but it's actually Naviance because it's navigate, and they make fun of us. Naviance. So if you look on your school's pages,
Really not.
likely happening at the high school level, but if you look on the pages, counseling offices, there's often a link.
Scroll.
Some of your districts may not have parent access. Some may only offer student access.
Look on your school's counseling website.
Yep.
They all, I mean, I'm shocked at the great resources that they have there. Most schools have a college night, something going on that they bring parents to, come in and meet the counselors, find out what we do. How do you request transcripts from us? How do you get letters of recommendation? Every school has their process. But that would be my starting point, is the Maple Grove Counseling Center site.
The question is, PSEO, part-time, full-time, how does it affect colleges or what they're
Okay. Is it part-time when they're in high school going in, or when they're in college working part-time?
No.
No, PSEO is post-secondary enrollment option.
So PSEO is post-secondary enrollment option. So it's an
Oh, okay.
opportunity where students can take college-level coursework at a college, typically for juniors and seniors. Sophomores can do it now in very specific classes, basically like 1 or 2 tech classes, where they can explore that. PSEO is literally taking college classes at the college. So one of the things that we talk to our families about is considering what your academics look like at your high school before you make that decision on where you're going. The idea, PSEO was created for schools that didn't have access to higher level curriculum. For example, my high school where I graduated from had 3 AP classes. The high school that I work at has 7 AP classes, 37 IB classes, and 6 honors classes. So that's a very different conversation as to what kids can access and what they can't. The caution with PSEO is, while it can be a money saver, and for student families it's a really good option, not all colleges will accept it as college credit. If you're counting it towards high school graduation requirements, they may not count it towards your college credits. So you might think you're coming in with, I had one student who was debating between two colleges. One school gave them basically a full 1.5 years of academics based on his full-time PSEO status. The other school gave him nothing because it was all counted towards the graduation requirements of the high school. And keep in mind, as we talked about, colleges are a business. So if you're bringing in credits to them that you're not paying for on their campus, they're going to want to make sure that you're getting somehow. So yes, you took biology at that college, but is it the right biology? Is it the biology that you need for that program? So you have to really be, again, thoughtful and kind of ask the questions. And this is where to take a kind of deep breath, because there's no one right way, right? So there's no like, okay, well, should I do it or not? I mean, it's really a conversation about what makes the most sense for your family. And there's pros and cons either way.
Yeah, but I want to know what the right way is.
Yeah, well, medicine.
All right. Other questions?
I just want to add one more. Steve, I just want to add one more thing. The other thing about PSEO is if you do it full time, even part time, it does take the student out of the high school. So if they're not ready to be done with high school, probably not the right choice, because they are removed from either a half or full day, and that can impact activities they're involved in and whatnot. So that's something else to think about.
Developmentally also is the social aspect. So you're sending your, depending on the age and maturity level, your student to a college campus earlier than you thought.
Any other questions? There's a lot of questions over the last, a lot of information.
Question may be directed to you in terms of do you do anything in the school to track the kids' progress in the first 9th grade, 10th grade, who you see are not doing well academically and may have the potential to do well, and trying to kind of give them the information, the stimulus to one that maybe their parents aren't aware of at home? Is that a pretty common support system, evaluation system that you use?
So the question is, how do we monitor students' on-track progress towards graduation? It's going to vary by school and by district and by the resources associated with those things. But yes, like colleges are rated and evaluated on their 4-year graduation rate, so are high schools. So you can see that on the Department of Ed website. Obviously, we want to have students, again, I believe strongly in options for kids. So, you know, the more things they have in their pocket, the more doors that can be open. So we do monitor, there's graduation requirements that they have to take specific classes and have to earn specific credits in specific courses. So that's monitored. And if they're not doing that successfully, we look at what are the makeup options, we look at other things. And then depending on the level we're talking about, sometimes it's a question of, is this the best fit for you? My high school has about almost 2,000 students. That's a small college campus. You know, is that the right place for you to be? So really kind of thinking about that, and that's where your school counselor comes in as well to have those conversations. But again, as you know, for parents, connecting with teachers, staying on top of it, you know, parenting through high school in that way of connecting with the classroom is so important.
All right, I'm going to say some thank yous first. Just remember, these two have cards. Thank you so much for your information. You do too? Oh. But you're not for hire, are you?
Price is right.
And that is no. Okay. But these two are in the same business as Cozy.
Actually, the business I work for, Achieve, really their bread and butter is test prep. They mostly do ACT, SAT, and accepting test prep.
Thank you.
And then I'm an add-on. So college counseling, I'm a bonus.
She's a bonus. Okay. She's a bonus. Do you want to say anything about your business?
No, I mean, I'm fairly self-explanatory. I mean, I don't do test prep, so I do everything else, but
okay, but they will be here to answer any questions about what they're doing. I need to thank Seth, because I think Seth was probably the individual who maybe really wanted us to do this, probably because his kids are always getting ready to go off to college. So I really very much appreciate it. And in line with that, there's an individual here, Marcia Zappa. Want to stand up for a sec? Justin, please give a round of applause. recently joined the leadership team at Affiance Financial because of her she's not a financial planner, but she truly kind of understands what is important to you. And because of that gift that she has, she truly helps us put all this together, and then she takes care of the logistics so that we can look really good. So thank you. Thank you. We do want you to remember that Affiance Financial does have this Moneynomics program available for high school kids, college kids, kids who actually graduate from college. The amount of the lack of financial literacy that is in the world is really bad. There's a lot. And one of the things, Affiance, one of the organizations we support is called Best Prep, which goes into the high school to do a lot of teaching about financial literacy. But today, what we are concerned about is you and your kids. So don't hesitate to give us a call on that issue. Tonight was fantastic. I just learned so much. I learned a lot about just this whole process and then all the emotional aspects that were going on. So I'm going to ask you, all four of you, short. Okay, short answer. Hang on. What is the one piece of advice you'd like to offer college-bound students and their families? One piece of advice. Seth?
Accept the fact that you don't know what you don't know. And it is very purposely done. In my opinion, it's purposely done by universities to make things as opaque as possible. It is not transparent, which means that it is really beneficial to get people who know or help with this process.
I would say there's no correlation between what students do in the summer and the admissions that they're going to get in December through March. So don't force your student to go do something because you think it's the right thing for them to do. If they want to go spend their last summer before high school being a camp counselor, they have just as much opportunity to get into the school of their dreams as someone who's going to do an internship. There's zero correlation.
Being a camp counselor is a really good job. I'm totally biased because my daughter runs a camp. Okay?
It's true.
Huh?
Yeah, she's hiring. Because I'm like this, I have two. One is there's a book written by Frank Bruni. Do you know how it's said? It's literally called "Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be."
Say it again.
Where you go is not who you'll be. And there's a lot of information in the book that talks about looking at CEOs, talks about looking at presidents and the assumptions about what we make about getting into the quote right institution and what it really looks like. When we talk about fit, it's really critical. Finding a place where your kid is comfortable. Think of them as jeans. You might match in jeans, but do they all really fit? So that's what you're looking for. And my other thing is approach it with humor. I mean, it is stressful and scary and exciting all at the same time. And if you get too wrapped up in it, you kind of lose some of those things. So I haven't encountered one that's so serious that you can't find something to laugh about. So try to do that.
We are on the same wavelength. I just read this article and I think it was so brilliant how the person said it. It's not where you go to college, it's how you go. And as much as anything, to be helping your student learn to be a self-advocator, to be a problem solver, to be open-minded to trying new things, to be willing to jump in and explore, sort of building those kind of personal traits and characteristics, and then taking those to college with you, you really can go anywhere to school. But what you do when you get there is what's really going to matter.